It is Country Viewpoint here on Flow FM, and in this digital world that we operate today, agriculture has come a long way. We're increasingly using agriculture for many things on farm, whether it be to balance the books or even to drive the header. These days, a lot of people are looking forward to the days where they won't have to leave their lounge room to harvest the crops. But look, the reality is, as we use technology more and more in agriculture, ransomware and cyber attacks become an increasing threat in agriculture. We've been seeing it throughout the industry in recent times. And a man who understands this better than I will is on the line right now. We welcome him to the program, Stephen Coe, who is a cybersecurity expert at Avast. How are you, Stephen? Welcome to Country Viewpoint.
Good, Jason. I'm well, thank you, and glad to be on your show.
Great to have you on. This is certainly not an area I know well. Many of our listeners are being dragged into the 21st century, some kicking and screaming, it's fair to say, but we do understand just how much technology has improved agriculture and the productivity gains around that. But like anything, there are some risks as well, and certainly ransomware and cyber attacks are part of that. Before I ask you specifically about those threats, can I ask you about Avast and the work that you do there? Tell us a little bit about the company and how you operate.
Sure. So Avast is a global leader in privacy and security. So essentially, Avast has about over 435 million users across the world, and so I'm based in Brisbane, and I lead the global the red team, meaning that we're a team of ethical hackers at Avast that do hacking in a good way, meaning we hack our systems and our products to make sure that we find all the bugs and flaws before the real hackers do. So so this is what is part of the Avast way to make sure that our products and our users, customers are safe who use our antivirus and anti-malware products.
Sure, excellent. Well, let's have a look at the threats to Australian agriculture. It's such a big industry. It's a big part of what we do here at Flow FM across our Flow network. And there are some threats. There are some issues. Ransomware is one of those. But what specifically have you found are the biggest threats to the agriculture industry when it comes to possible cyber attacks?
Sure. So just to set the scene, ransomware is really prevalent at the moment, and it is a form of malware that encrypts the victim's file. So essentially, the attacker will get into your system and then demand a ransom payment. So in terms of cryptocurrency or Bitcoin currency, normally demand this ransom before they will restore access to this payment. So that's how they have you and sort of keep your ransom. Now, what's happening at the moment is that the hacker groups are targeting many of our critical infrastructure. So when I talk about national critical infrastructure, I'm talking about things like telecommunications, water, electricity, health systems, banking, and also food production. So food, logistics and production, definitely part of the critical infrastructure, and they are targeted because once they do that, it affects, has a serious and immediate effect on our daily lives, just like what you mentioned earlier with the JBS hack with the meat production. So, and hackers know this, right? They know that if they hit something that's critical, we react straight away, and depending on the circumstances, they can squeeze us to extort that money because it's affecting our daily lives.
Absolutely. Now, I guess next the obvious multi-billion-dollar question comes, and that is, how do we best protect ourselves from this type of attack? Ransomware and cyber attacks are certainly not new, as you said, but increasingly they're becoming more and more sophisticated, and they're targeting more and more people across the country, particularly involved in agriculture. So how best does either a sole trader or a member of an industry group, whichever part of the industry people come from, how do they best protect themselves from this threat?
Sure. Good question, Jason. So just to, again, set the scene, I'll describe briefly how hackers are getting in so that you'll get a picture of what to look out for. So the most discreet or easiest way attackers are getting into our infrastructure or your systems are through stealing credentials. Now, if you're like most of us, and a lot of people now access both their work system or their home emails and other systems through the same item, object, or device. So if you're like me, I'm using my phone to connect to my corporate network to access my files on G Drive, and then also going to WhatsApp and Facebook and other social media. And that convergence means that it becomes easier for hackers to send you things like mobile phishing attacks, and which means that it socially engineers you to click on a link, which then infects that device, and then because your device is also possibly connected to the wireless access point to your home office or office network where your agricultural system may be residing, your accounting system or your control system, that allows it to jump across and then starts looking for vulnerable systems that may be unpatched to start attacking and encrypting those systems. So that's one way, and a fairly common way, that we are getting infected.
Right. So with that infection in mind, and that's obviously the main way, and that I guess if there's a garden variety way, there would be many others as well. For example, the use of Google Chrome browsers over different systems at home and at work. Similar sort of thing, really, I guess, is what you were just describing there with the phone. If you're accessing your work emails and your home emails all on the one browser, it's pretty easy for hackers to get hold of credentials inside of something like that.
Oh, definitely. So because we are really so converged into in using the same browser, access the same network, and a lot of times, the small and medium-sized businesses, even large businesses, don't properly segregate their systems from each other. Meaning that your office system, your email system is runs on the same network as your control system. So unless you're segregating that to prevent a spread, then that makes attackers spread easier. Now, the answer to your other bit of the question was, yes, what are the things that we can do to protect ourselves? The short answer is that there's no one security strategy that can ransomware proof your organization or your business. But there are, however, steps that you can take, that all of us can take to raise that bar and make it harder for the attackers to come in and be successful. So the first thing to do is have multiple layers of defense. And that means first things to do would be to install antivirus, anti-malware products such as Avast free antivirus, for example, onto your endpoints, meaning your handsets, your mobile phones, and your servers and workstations. So keeping that up to date provides the first layer of protection, and if that's kept up to date, that antivirus will look for known scammers, known ransomware signatures to stop that coming in. The next thing is to keep all the other softwares updated. So if you're running accounting software, control software for your agricultural system, for example, to get the latest updates so that known vulnerabilities are not present and can be exploited by the attacker. An example is Windows 7, which was deprecated or went out of support by Microsoft, is now obviously vulnerable because it's unpatched and being exploited. But there are a lot of systems across multiple industries, and not just agriculture, but medical imaging, for example, where it was first installed a few years ago and it's using Windows 7, but now Windows 7 is no longer supported. That becomes a vulnerable piece of software. So when a bit of malware comes in looking for things to exploit, that could become a target. So sure. That's the second. That's another important thing. And just a couple more. And the next really big layer of defense is education. So because the human element is still a big threat when we click on things, when you get SMS messages or emails that sounds interesting or tries to fool you that it's from your bank or some other things that you're expecting, for example, delivery. they're the ones that's a big issue, a big area where attacks come in, where we get fooled into clicking on something that introduces the malware. And so, being educated, knowing what phishing emails or SMS looks like, and how to detect them, and being really paranoid and not clicking on anything that you don't recognize or suspicious about is a big thing in stopping those things coming in. And lastly, really for all the businesses around, engaging specialists trained in cybersecurity to actually have a risk mitigation strategy or a plan for incident response is important. So you don't, obviously, if you're a small medium business, you will not probably have the resources to hire and build your own team, but you can leverage cybersecurity companies to come up with a plan so that if you do get an incident, you can respond quickly, recover quickly, and also detect so to minimize damage. So I think engaging specialist knowledge, just like you would engage specialist accountant, specialist engineering, our cybersecurity is no different. You can't know it all, so engage specialists to help with mitigation plan and response.
Certainly.
So I think they're the key ones.
Stephen, a great example, I think, of what these hackers can produce these days is, and you touched on this before, the world's largest meat processor, JBS. Now, tell us about the attack on these guys and how much it actually cost them, and how many jobs were put at risk as a result.
Yeah, so JBS is an interesting one, and because a Brazilian company with operations across, South America, North America, and Australia, as we know, they became a target because of their worldwide operation, and they are a critical infrastructure. So we saw in Australia that because it affected both American and Australian IT systems, it locked them up from access. It stopped and affected, the production and logistics and operations for about a week. Now, JBS was a big trigger because of the size of the operation, and originally the ransomware scammers demanded about $22.5 million as a ransom through negotiation, and it came actually down to about $11 million. But this is after much consideration, because the advice from both the ACSC, which is the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, and FBI and other security organisations, is to not pay a ransom because it can propagate and support these industries. But when you're faced with critical infrastructure and food supply issues in this case, or medical health system issues in the case of a lot of hospitals being locked up, then you weigh up, okay, do I pay $11 million to free up the system so that food can keep happening? Sorry, my dog started barking. And then the other consideration that happened was the scammers actually threatened to release confidential information that they obtained. So what we're seeing these days is not just a one-stage ransom attack where they encrypt things, but before they encrypt things, they also steal it and exfiltrate out, meaning they get a copy of all your critical data, and then they go, okay, you may be able to recover from backup your data, but then if you don't pay up, we will release all this sensitive commercial and personal data, which will often tend to drive share prices down, right? So they've got you. So even if you can recover, they threaten to publish data. And I think in the JBS case, they estimate or reckon that, okay, we better pay this. Otherwise, if this data gets leaked, the share prices may end up, or the drop may end up costing us $50 million, for example. So it's a choice between two evils, and in this case, they chose to do that to make the recovery quicker, so that they can get back online, jobs back on systems running, jobs back online and working, and hopefully the data not leaked, and which in this case happened.
Okay. It's certainly a complicated and complex issue, but the reality is you'll need some help if you want to protect yourself. Stephen, have you got any advice for people listening across our Flow network on where they can go for more information, where they can go for some help to protect themselves from ransomware and cyber attack in general?
Oh, for sure. So the Australian government side, the ACSC, so Australian Cybersecurity Centre, so ACSC, if you search for that, there's a wealth of information there to advise on best practices along the lines of what I mentioned and how to protect the system, how to report and get help. Certainly the Australian government is taking this very seriously, just like the American and the European government. This is coming up to become a national priority topic, and with the proposed bill by the Labor government, Labor sort of opposition, it's a shadow government now, shadow minister, to pass a bill to make the reporting of ransomware incident mandatory. That will help in the tracking and coordination of these events, and also hopefully attract a corresponding level of funding so that Australian businesses and government agencies can get assistance in implementing security programs to raise their level and also help in recovery and reporting. So ACSC is definitely the place to go and have a look at.
Excellent. Stephen, it's been great chatting with you today. Thank you for telling us about cybersecurity and why it's so important that we protect ourselves in the agriculture industry. Great chatting with you, a cybersecurity expert with Avast, Stephen Coe. Thanks for joining us here on Country Viewpoint.
Thank you, Jason. It's been a pleasure.